Let's have a discussion about rest and cycling. Now this topic is especially important if you ride hard a lot or if you train, but it's also important even if you're more of a recreational rider. I put rest in 4 different categories, and we'll be talking about these different categories in this video. Micro rest, mid rest, macro, and then forced rest. And if you don't learn to rest properly, then you will be forced to rest. I view training as the building blocks or bricks, and I view rest as the cement or mortar that holds that wall together. So as you ride, your muscles are broken down, and as you rest, they're built back up. And that's why rest is just as important as training. If you have soreness after a ride, you've done damage to your muscles, but it's good damage because your muscles are rebuilt and they're rebuilt stronger. If you are like me, it can be mentally tough to rest because we have this mentality of we have to be out there pushing and pushing and pushing to be stronger, and we simply don't want to rest because we think it's counterproductive. But actually, it's the opposite. Rest can be very important in making you a stronger and faster cyclist. Now, what you want to do is actually plan or schedule your rest so that you're not forced to rest because of overtraining or even an overuse injury. The first category of rest that we'll talk about is micro rest, and by that I mean, what does your week look like? I generally recommend taking 1 to 2 days off per week. And by that I mean full days off the bike. So you're not just doing an easy spin, you're actually off the bike and not riding. Now, if you're in a season where you're doing really easy rides, really easy spins, then it really doesn't matter. You can ride 7 days a week. By this, I'm more referring to when you're riding harder. Now, when you're in those seasons where you're riding harder or training harder, you want to do 1 day hard, 1 day easy, or 2 days hard followed by 2 days easy. You do not want to ride hard 5 days in a row. So during my hard training season or race season, my typical week will look like hard intervals on Tuesday and Thursday. I've got maybe some tempo built in there, some easy spin days, I've got my rest days. And then on Saturdays, if I'm not racing, I'm doing my long rides, so those would be 3 to 5 hours. Now let's talk about mid-level rest, and this refers to what does your month look like. So when you're in those harder training seasons, generally you want to do 3 weeks on followed by 1 week off. Now during that 1 week off, it's 5 days of an either easy spin or completely off the bike. So I'll do Monday through Friday riding maybe 2 days, and then the other 3 days off. And when I ride on those 2 days, it's a very easy spin. It's an hour or less with your heart rate in zone 1 or zone 2. Now, if you're in a season where you're not training or riding that hard, then this doesn't really apply. You can ride all during the month and not have to worry about an off week. Now, oftentimes life doesn't work out perfectly where you can plan 3 weeks on, 1 week off. So if I have a trip coming up where I know I'm going to be off the bike, then I'll just plan accordingly. So it might be where I ride 2 weeks and then take a week off, or might ride 4 weeks or take a week off. So you just got to plan it based on your schedule, based on life. Now let's talk about macro rest, and this can actually be harder to define because people have different theories of what a break from cycling would look like. It used to be that pros would take a month or so off the bike, and now I've heard they only take a week or 2 off the bike. But the idea is to give yourself a mental and physical break from cycling. So I recommend about a month of not doing any structured training, not really focusing on hard riding. You may be on the bike, you may not be on the bike. You want to stay active. I believe in exercising 5 days a week, but you're doing other sports. So you may do cross-country skiing, you may do kayaking, you may work out in the gym, brisk walks, that kind of thing, to give yourself that mental and physical break from cycling. And this is especially true if you race. It's not a good idea to push hard and race all year long. You're probably going to get burnt out if you try to race 12 months out of the year. If you're in an area where you can ride all year round like I do, there are events all year round. So you got to be disciplined and make yourself kind of just take that break from cycling. Now, as you come out of your macro rest season, which like I said, generally is at least 2 to 3 weeks, maybe a month or a little bit longer, you're going to start building your base. I'm not going to talk too much about periodization on this video, but I'll just summarize it and basically say that there are 3 base periods, so base 1, 2, and 3, each of those being about a month, and then there's your build periods, build 1 and build 2, and during that time is when you do your really hard structure intervals. So base 1 is either off the bike or doing cross training. Base 2, you're starting to get more miles on the bike. You're starting to do a little bit of a tempo type workout. And then in base 3, you're spending a lot of time on the bike and you're starting to get some intervals built in there. And that's your highest volume. And then your volume kind of ramps down as you get into your build 1, build 2, and then your peak phase, which is just a couple weeks right before your big race. There are studies that show that if you focus on some intervals in the base 2, base 3, that's good. There's a lot of different theories. You can do your own research, but I think that doing some intensity during those times, again, not real intense like build 1, build 2, maybe some intervals like where you're doing 30 seconds on, rest for about 3 minutes, and just keep doing that over and over until you're exhausted. Those kind of intervals can be good mixed here and there. Again, there's a lot of research out there that you can do, but that's the general idea of the macro rest, that physical mental break, and then start to build back up. Now let's talk about forced rest, and this is mentally the absolute hardest type of rest that you can do because it comes because of an injury, either a crash or maybe it's an overuse injury or overtraining, or maybe you have an illness, but you cannot ride the bike. What helps during this time is to remind yourself that this can be really beneficial. To give you an example, I strained my IT band years ago and I was off the bike for 5 months. I did not strain it on the bike, I was doing something else, but I was not able to ride. I would try to ride and I just couldn't, it would flare up, and so it was a mess for about 5 months. By the time I was able to get back on the bike and really push hard, I was so stoked to ride. I was so mentally and physically rested that I really feel like I was stronger once I was able to get back on the bike. So like I had mentioned previously, overtraining may be a reason why you have to rest. So I want to talk about that because that can be prevented if you plan your rest accordingly and if you can recognize the symptoms of overtraining. One of the ways to recognize overtraining is if you're pushing hard and you just cannot get your heart rate up, or you may not be able to hang with people that you normally would be able to hang with, and you're training hard, that's a sign that it's time to rest and you might be getting overtrained. Another sign of being overtrained is you just feel fatigued all the time. Even though you're getting the proper sleep, you just feel maybe irritable. I've also heard that people that are getting into an overtrained state have difficulty sleeping, so you may just not be able to sleep well during the night. One of the ways that I know that I need to rest and maybe starting to get overtrained is when I think about riding, I'm just like, oh. And when I am like that about riding, I know it is really time for me to rest. Another symptom of maybe getting overtrained is you have muscle soreness that will not go away. It's perfectly normal to have sore legs a day or two after a hard ride or race, but if that soreness just will not go away, then you're probably at the point of starting to get overtrained and you need to rest. So if you're feeling those signs of overtraining, you need to rest at least 5 days. So go back to that 1 week off that I talked about, where you take 5 days either off the bike or maybe doing just an easy spin a couple days during that 5-day period. Of course, the more overtrained you get, the longer that rest period needs to be. Now, I've heard of some professional athletes that have gotten so overtrained, it's literally taken them a year to recover from that. That's why it's so important to recognize these signs of getting overtrained. Because the thing about being overtrained is the longer and harder you push yourself in that state, the longer it's going to take you to recover. Now, just a note here, you can actually get overtrained if you're only riding about 10 hours a week, if you're like me who works full time. So the difference between a really high level pro cyclist who's training hard and an amateur cyclist oftentimes is the fact that at that pro level, they may do a hard training ride or race and they get a massage afterwards. Someone's making their food from them. They can just rest and prop their legs up. For us amateur cyclists, when we get done with a 5-hour ride on a Saturday, we still have to come home, do yard work, mow the grass, spend some time with the kids, go play tennis with the kids. We're just busy, and then we got to go to work on Monday mornings. If you have a really busy lifestyle and you're training hard, then you could get overtrained even with a lower volume. So that will wrap up this discussion of rest and cycling. It's important to keep in mind that rest is just as important as training. You're not always going to do it perfectly. You're going to make mistakes, but if you learn from those mistakes and you learn to listen to your body, you're going to be able to plan your rest properly so that you'll have many years of strong and enjoyable cycling. Thanks for watching.